Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very special episode of Midnight Double Feature, a podcast that today is playing host to someone who introduces his own podcast in the very same way that I am right now. This is an episode that I'm totally going to be geeking out on because our guest has been in the same room and has had the opportunity to speak to some of my favorite filmmakers of all time. Kevin Smith, Roger Deakins, Sam Mendes, Quentin Tarantino, Kevin Feige, Edward Norton, Chad Stahelski, Mike Flanagan, and Damien Chazelle. Joe and Anthony Russo, I can't forget them as well. And so much more. I'm totally going to just lord over the fact that I'm now 1 degree removed from those people, because joining us here on Midnight Double Feature today is none other than Managing Director of CinemaBlend, co-host of the ReelBlend Podcast, and the author of the recently completed Release the Snyder Cut, Sean O'Connell. How you doing, man?
I am wonderful, man. I'm so happy to be here. This is going to be great. I'm psyched. When you list all those names, it's overwhelming to think about the number of people we've been so lucky to speak to on the podcast and to get into, it was funny to hear before we jumped on, you were talking about this just being like a casual film conversation. And that's what we try to do on ReelBlend too. And to get those people, those names that you've listed, to sit down and just BS about film because we're all just fans is the best. And so I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where, sure, these guys are dealing, they're playing around with millions and millions of dollars in the case of Joe and Anthony Russo. But when you bring it down to it, we're all just fans, right? We're all just geeks. We're all just nerds. We love the source material that these things come from. We love the ideas. We love the stories. So yeah, I'm stoked to have this conversation with you. So thank you so much.
Very cool.
Sean, before we get to the meat of the episode, we are here to talk about your book, Release the Snyder Cut, the crazy true story behind the fight to save Zack Snyder's Justice League. Before we get into that, I found you and CinemaBlend via ReelBlend, your podcast. You're the managing director of CinemaBlend, and you're one of 3 hosts of ReelBlend, plus your producer, Gabe. Tell me a bit about those 2 outlets, especially ReelBlend. Like, tell me how you and Jake Hamilton and Kevin McCarthy and Gabe ended up finding each other.
Oh, sure. So Jake and Kevin and I knew each other for years as part of something we talk about on the show all the time called the Junket Circuit, which is just basically whenever a new movie is going to come out, the studios will host these press events, largely in New York or Los Angeles, and different outlets from around the country and around the globe will get invited to these places because you can get the film team in one spot, whether it's the director, all the cast members, sometimes the writer or cinematographer or some such, and conduct all your interviews in a busy weekend where press just cycles through and asks their questions. And because of that, you end up seeing a lot of the same faces, all the same reporters who are working from the different outlets. And you tend to gravitate towards people who you like and relate to, kind of thing. And I always ended up talking with those 2 in these group situations because you spend a lot of time. You are at the same hotel with them when you're in a different place. You take shuttle buses to the different movie screenings for whatever you're going to go see. It's a lot of downtime and it's a lot of just killing time by talking to people. And I have learned that I have a lot in common with those guys. We have the same sort of sense of humor. We just relate to different things. So at one point, CinemaBlend is the site that I have been working for since 2011, and I wasn't always a managing director. I've just sort of climbed my way up the ranks. But we were floating the idea of having a podcast, and my bosses gave me the opportunity to just sort of say, brainstorm what you would like to do. And I'm a huge admirer of sports talk radio, and I always thought that the sports talk radio format could translate into an entertainment format as well, too, where
right.
Without endless.
Are you a fan of The Ringer? The Ringer podcast?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. And what I admire about The Ringer and Bill Simmons and all those guys is that they have a really deep well of knowledge. They know what they're talking about. They're just really conversational. They just know how to do it. And so I sent an email around to those guys, and we were going to do it just as an awards show. And we started as Awards Blend, and we were going to do it for the Oscar season and just get on, microphone and talk about what we thought was going to compete for that year and seeing those films and then sort of talking about the interviews that we were getting from it. And then once we got to the end of that award season, we were having such a good time doing it that we just kept going. So we're at episode number 126, I think we just recorded. And it's funny now. We would never want it to stop. Like we look forward to it each way. I thought it would be an issue with our schedules, like getting those two guys especially. They're busier than even I am. And but now they really go out of their way. We all go out of our way to make time for it and to make the podcast happen. And so we have such a good time with it.
It's fantastic. I'm honestly so glad that, you know, all four of you guys, you know, go out of your way to make time for it, because it's just such a bright part of my week, you know. I was just telling you off air.
God, I love hearing that, man. That makes me so happy.
No, truly, it's fantastic. I found ReelBlend sometime around December last year, November last year. So just kind of gearing up for the Oscars. And, you know, you guys were talking about, you know, debating about 1917 and Parasite and Joker was in the mix too, and The Irishman. I even, just in preparation for this podcast, I went back and I listened to kind of like a few from the back catalog. I listened to your interview with Kevin Smith when he was promoting the reboot, Jay and Silent Bob reboot. So I'll get to Kevin Smith in a sec, but yeah, man, I really love your interviews that you have on ReelBlend, especially.
Thank you.
It's fantastic.
Thank you so much, man. And I'll tell you what I love about the interviews, and it's really funny to hear you say that. And it's funny that I really do think that the interviews have attracted a lot of people to the show, because we had no intention of doing interviews on the show at all. That's what we do. That's our job.
Oh. And
the podcast was never meant to feel like a job at all.
Oh, 100%. You want to separate the two. I totally feel. I mean, like I do law as a career.
Okay.
You know, I want something totally removed in my normal hobby, in my normal life.
Absolutely. And so even though we were just going to turn the microphones on and talk about movies, there's a lot of work that goes into securing an interview, and we didn't want that headache because we do it as part of our normal job. However, what the angle that we found is that directors prefer the longer form, sit down and discuss at length, you know, and we do get very technical, but we also talk big picture with a lot of different people. And at a junket, you normally get these 4-minute, 5-minute segments with the actors, with the cast, and actors are better at that. They can cycle through people faster. Directors don't want to do that. You know, they want to get into lengthy discussions, lengthy conversations, lengthy explanations about why they're doing it. So that the podcast became a really great format from that. But also, the three of us, whenever we sit down to prepare our interviews, we find, and it's just natural, this is organic, this is how it happens, all three of us come at a film from completely different angles. And then we set up our questions and we do roundtable robin, where when we're sitting with the director, they never know what they're going to get. They're not going to get the same interview. They're essentially getting 3 different interviews thrown at them. And it keeps them on their toes and it makes it really interesting. And we've heard from so many directors who are just like, this was so much fun because we covered so many bases and a lot of places we didn't expect to go. And so that's always rewarding for us to hear.
No, absolutely. And it must feel like refreshing for a director to get this kind of like that kind of interview style, because I mean, you know, these directors are going between outlet and outlet, and you know they're you know getting thrown pretty much the same question the entire day or the entire week, however long the junket circuit is. So, I mean, I'd imagine you sit down with a director like Quentin Tarantino, which you have, by the way, and you know he gets thrown these questions, and not only that, he feels how passionate you and Kevin and Jake are, and is totally into it, is into the conversation. So much so that he wanted to stay there and talk even longer, you know? Like that is such a long interview, and it's just such a fantastic interview that happened. By the way, my favorite part of that episode, by the way, is just the story of setting up that interview.
Yeah. I mean, everything that could have gone wrong leading up to that from a technical standpoint went completely wrong. And that's a perfect example of what we're talking about, where we didn't want to do it. But at the same time, if we didn't go down the route of getting interviews, we never would have been at the position to get Quentin the second time. And really, and I think we've said this on the podcast before, that stemmed from him doing a podcast with us around the time of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And we don't want to, like, we set it up like an interview. We definitely do questions. We treat it professionally. But what we would love for the auspice of the interview to just sort of fall away. and we want it to just become a conversation. We want it to just become a hang, which is why
just as friends.
When you get like a Damien Chazelle and he starts talking about the Final Destination movies, he's there to plug a Netflix show, but we just start going down so many different rabbit holes. And this is part of the fun too. It can be really stressful when you're setting up your individual interview. If you're just the only one-on-one with somebody and you're on an island and it needs to work, you stress about your questions. I have come now to be even more comfortable in an interview setting with those two guys, because it's so much fun to play off of something that they ask or something that they ask that the talent then responds to. And then that's when the conversation really starts to go. Like, someone will give an answer and you'll say, oh, that's really cool. Let's go in that direction. And those two guys are such professionals. Jake and Kevin are, to their credit, such professionals that all of us are able to just sort of pick up the thread and go with it and go off script and see where it's going to go. And now the interviews, of course, have become a highlight of doing the show with them.
Well, as a podcaster, it's truly kind of inspiring just how quick fire you guys are able to come up with, different sort of like retorts to what the director said, or just how you're able to pivot to different things so naturally and so in such in a casual way. It's just like I that's what I really kind of like analyze between you three is like just how natural your conversation type is, and at the same time it still flows, and it's still a podcast. Really, it's still an interview. Like, you're still extracting information out of your director or subject or whoever you're interviewing.
It's very funny because I really just think it's chemistry that can't be faked. I like
there you go.
If you slapped a podcast together, but you like pulled three different people who don't know each other and said, make an entertaining show, you'd struggle. And so, but listen, all credit goes to Gabe, who keeps the three of us on some track. And I know we give him a hard time, for wrapping us and everything. But he does have a tremendous ear for, you guys have talked about this already, or you're in a topic too long, move on kind of thing. And he's incredibly valuable from that perspective.
No, totally. And, especially when it comes down to whether you pronounce Charlize Theron's last name as Theron or Theron, it makes it's pretty good to have a good producer on your side.
Always wrong. I seem to be the one to mess that up every single time.
Don't worry, I've said Theron pretty much my entire life. So let's get to the meat of this episode. Before we get to the book, Sean, what are your personal thoughts on the current cut of Justice League? I watched the movie again in preparation for this podcast, and I am on record, like, the Midnight Double Feature audience is going to know if I lie or not, so I gotta be 100% truthful. I am not a fan of the current cut.
Oh, no. The theatrical one that Joss Whedon put out?
Yeah.
Nightmare. It's a horrendous nightmare that never should have been allowed to happen for so many different reasons. This is Warner Brothers' first stab at a live action Justice League, which DC fans had been waiting their entire lives to see. And they didn't bother to put any effort into it to make it passable. Not even great. I would take watchable, at this point. And they didn't. They cut every corner that they could think of. They tried to reverse engineer a lighthearted Marvel comedy out of whatever existing footage that Zack had given them, and that Whedon could reshoot in a ridiculously short amount of time in an effort to hold on to a release date that they had no business hitting. And it's so funny now that in hindsight, we know that release dates are extremely fluid. Like, we're all going through a situation right now where movies that we had been wanting to see for the longest time are being put off. And the release date of Justice League should have been delayed when Zack left the project. Whether they were bringing Joss on board, they should have given him more time to do what he needed to do. Something else should have happened, because the version that they were given to fans is horrific. And that's a huge mistake on the studio's part.
No, absolutely. Like, it feels like a... Oh, God, every time I watch it, it feels like a Franken film, Like, I mean, Batman versus Superman, problems. There are a few problems in that movie, and, the ultimate cut is better. But that movie feels like one director's vision, right? I mean, like, whereas Justice League feels like two different people came into a conversation and they just started talking over each other.
Yeah, exactly. And I've stressed this point multiple times too. If you're going to hire somebody to finish Zack Snyder's movie, you should find somebody who has a similar voice to Zack Snyder, and Joss
Right.
Whedon and Zack Snyder they're not on the same page in any way. You don't hire either of them to attain the same type of film. They just work in completely different realms, and so
it just clashes.
Yeah,
it clashes in the worst ways. And not only that, like the most baffling part of it to me, and probably the most disrespectful part of it, probably on Zack's end of it, I can't imagine how Zack feels about this, is that it's still credited as directed by Zack Snyder.
That's the worst. And I have asked a lot of people about that, and I think it has something to do with the Directors Guild Association.
I had my suspicions, yeah.
Yeah, because I even make an argument that if they had credited that theatrical cut as Joss Whedon's film, the fan base might not have been as upset. They probably still would have been fighting for Zack's ultimate vision to be restored, but it wouldn't be nearly as insulting, because a lot of people who I spoke to in the Release the Snyder Cut movement, were truly just offended that this, horrible film carried Zack's name. And so when they talk about fighting for artistic integrity, part of that is to get his original vision restored. But part of that was also because his name is on that film, and it shouldn't be, because it's not his in any way, shape, or form.
Exactly. It's not his vision. Well, I mean, and you talked about the movement. Let's move on to the movement itself. Mm-hmm. How did you find yourself on board with the idea that there's potentially another cut out there? How did that, spark ignite in you? How did you know about the movement coming into it when you started writing the book, or did you find that out afterwards? Yeah. What started this for you?
I mean, I had a casual knowledge of the movement just because at CinemaBlend we cover everything, but we put a huge emphasis on blockbusters. And so because we are what I believe living through the golden age of superhero films, we do a lot of coverage for Marvel and DC. And so I was always fascinated by the transition that happened with Justice League. I mean, it went all the way back. I mean, it went back from Zack starting with Man of Steel. It went back to the insane levels of hype that surrounded BVS because of getting those two characters on screen for the first time together in one movie was, enormous levels of expectation. But then when you add Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, the first live action Wonder Woman, the excitement levels were through the roof for that movie. So then to see how Zack planned to bridge, into the first live action Justice League movie, that we were all latched onto that. And when it went so horribly wrong, we were always going to cover the fallout on CinemaBlend, and that included Suicide Squad getting sort of swept up in that debacle. And then it included plans for these standalone films, Wonder Woman being a standalone film, Aquaman potentially getting a standalone film. We were always covering all of that. But in the background, you heard this Release the Snyder Cut movement, and it was the hashtag Release the Snyder Cut all over social media. And you would say, look at these guys, what are they doing?
It was a minority, but it was a vocal minority, right?
It absolutely was a vocal minority. But what intrigued me was Zack's use of the social media tool Vero, which I write this in the book, that at the time we had one writer on the CinemaBlend staff who signed up for a Vero account, and none of the rest of us bothered to do it because nobody else was using Vero. I mean, everyone was on Twitter or some such. But
correct me if I'm wrong, Sean. That's Zack's. He owns that app, right?
He doesn't own it, but he's friends with the guy who runs it, and he's really close friends with the guy who runs it. And he might have put some money behind it or some such, but he is definitely involved in it because he appreciates the fact that they allegedly don't use an algorithm to manipulate, data usage. It's a really clean, simple way for him as a director to communicate directly with his fans. And Absolutely. So we would write a bunch of stories about photos or video, or mainly photos, that Zack shared from his version of Justice League after the theatrical cut was out. It'd be like, here's a shot of Kiersey Clemons, and she plays Iris West in the movie. And here's a shot of Victor Stone in Cyborg in a scene that doesn't make it. And we would always write that up and we'd be like, oh, wow, Zack is actually throwing his weight behind, the idea that there's a deleted cut of Justice League. And that's always intriguing. Anytime, like, we're kind of writing about the Schumacher cut now of Batman Forever. And there's an Alita Battle Angel fan base that wants to fight for a sequel. All those stories are intriguing to us. So I was aware of it, but I guess I wasn't 100% fully on board until I was in San Diego for the 2019 San Diego Comic-Con. And the group, they did an event that they now consider, they call it Project Comic-Con, where they had collected a bunch of funds through fundraising in the movement, and they wanted to basically bombard downtown San Diego with marketing for the Release the Snyder Cut, for the Snyder Cut of Justice League. And I was walking past a bus, like a bus stop station, that just was wallpapered with professional advertising for Release the Snyder Cut, with like quotes from the actors, quotes from Zack. And I think the slogan said something along the lines of like, learn the true story of the 3.5 hour version of Justice League. And I was like, wow, these guys aren't like, hey,
that's awesome.
I'm gonna give up on this. And then, so somewhere between that, the July Comic-Con, and then October was New York Comic-Con. Somewhere in between those two, I was starting to kick around the idea of there's a bigger story going on here. Let me start digging into what it is. And I just started noodling notes together and, figuring out if there's more story to tell here. And then in October of 2019, the Release the Snyder Cut movement purchased a Times Square billboard in the heart of Manhattan in New York City during the weekend of New York Comic-Con. And
that is not cheap.
No, exactly. And it's a digital billboard with a bunch of messaging about the unreleased cut of Snyder Cut. And I thought, this is insane. Like, this is a story that I really have to start putting together. And I just started digging through it. Man,
that's fantastic. Like, you just kind of, like, it just kind of just took you over. Like, you're just like, okay, I am now driven to find out what this was all about. Like, that's awesome, man. Like, I'm a big, I'm not going to say I'm a big conspiracy theorist, but like, I'm interested in conspiracy theories. Like, JFK, and how Stephen King writes 11/22/63 and all that stuff. Like, I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like, finding out, because I was a bit cynical. Like, I'm just like, oh yeah, I guess there's a Snyder Cut out there, but I mean, like, I don't know if it will ever see the light of day. And if it does, it's probably not completed, and I can't see a studio putting in money to finishing it. And we'll get to the announcements recently about it being on HBO Max, but that was a pipe dream back in the day. I mean, when you had Kevin Smith on your podcast to talk about the Snyder Cut on ReelBlend, that was episode 78, by the way. I love that episode.
Nice.
He's so passionate about it, because he also talks about it on Fat Man. It used to be called Fat Man on Batman, but it's now Fat Man Beyond.
I didn't know he changed it. That's funny.
Yeah, no, he did, because he dropped a ton of weight after the heart attack. So he's like, naturally, I got to change the name. What was it like for you when you had Kevin Smith on your podcast, kind of talking about the Snyder Cut? Like, was that when you were? Because I couldn't kind of glean from the interview if you had already started the book or whether you were considering starting the book.
Oh yeah, I had started it, and that was a little bit selfish. We were having Kevin on, obviously, to promote the Jay and Silent Bob reboot. And also, for people who don't know, and please go back and listen to this story, there's my co-host, Kevin McCarthy, it is integral to getting Ben Affleck to return to...
such an amazing story.
It's an incredible story. And it's such a good story that Kevin Smith now tells it everywhere he goes. Like, when he took Jay and Silent Bob on the press tour and he basically brought it around from city to city to show it to fans, the story of Kevin McCarthy getting Ben Affleck to join the reboot cast was part of his repertoire, and he told it at every single stop, which is just, I love the fact that happened with Kevin. So we were going to have Kevin Smith on to talk about his connection with Kevin McCarthy anyway. And at some point during the preparation, I said to the guys, I said, hey, look, I'm going to bring up the Snyder Cut because I'm trying to collect information here from different people, and this is our chance to get Kevin Smith. And like you said, I know that he discusses it often on his podcast because he's just immersed in pop culture like that. So to hear him talk about it at length that day kind of reaffirmed a lot of things that I already knew, which is that it's not in a version that you could just drop into theaters right now. But then he went into how I feel about it also too, and how I thought a lot of people in the movement felt about a Snyder Cut is that even if it's unfinished, we as an audience have been trained over the years to watch deleted scenes, to watch things that are on DVDs that are work in progress. And we're okay with that. You can use your imagination to kind of fill in the blanks. And if we ever were going to see a Snyder Cut of Justice League, that probably was going to have a lot of those things put into place. And in fact, Zack draws, hand draws or sketches all of the scenes. And one of his slogans that he would use on Vero was, "I shoot everything that I draw." So he would share storyboards of scenes that would include like Martian Manhunter being in Justice League. And everyone would be like, "Did you shoot it? Did you shoot that?" And he's like, "I shoot everything I draw." So we're like, "Oh my God, that's going to be so cool to see that." But that's like a visual effect that you need to finish too. So if he were able to release his Snyder Cut vision, would it have finished effects or would it just be a sketch of Martian Manhunter? And I think the fan base, and I think I asked a few of them over the course of interviewing, like, would you be okay with just seeing a work in progress,
like a previs kind of thing, right?
Yeah. And they were all to a person said, "Yeah, of course I would. I just want to see what it is. I just want to see his vision." Now, this is the point where I want to sort of bring up, like, the Snyder Cut could still be really bad. Like, there's no guarantee that it's a great movie, but that was never the case. I don't think that was never the point. And I think his fans are probably going to love it. And there's going to be people who are going to tell you that it's horrible, who've already made up their minds sight unseen. But it was always just about letting him have his vision come out. And so when people argue what the quality of the Snyder Cut is going to be, that's not the case that that I think the Snyder Cut movement was trying to fulfill.
No, exactly. It reminds me of have you? I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. The movie called Fanboys came out in 2009. It's got Dan Fogler, Jay Baruchel, and it's a story about these guys kind of road tripping to go see the Phantom Menace. They want to be at the premiere, and like the story of them traveling out to go see the Phantom Menace. And they finally sit down in the cinema and they're like, "Oh, what if this sucks?" It's the story of getting to the place is better than the actual movie, and that's the more interesting part to a lot of people, right?
Sure, that it's not a fear necessarily, but it's a concern. It's a concern that the battle to get this released might not have been worth the film. Now, however, but see, there's a couple of things that play into that. So Zack is going to get a chance to go back and finish his footage, right? Like HBO Max has given him a budget. They're letting him go. But now with COVID shutting the film industry down, he's not going to have access to all of the post-production people he necessarily would work with. It's not a full-blown movie studio production kind of thing. So how much does he need to finish? How much will he be able to finish? These are all questions that are unanswered up to this point.
No, absolutely. I mean, like you said, like Warner Brothers are giving him a budget, and we're hearing somewhere in the vicinity of $20 to $30 million. Could be more, could be less. I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts on it going to HBO Max? Like potentially as well as a 6-part TV show. Like, which again, I don't know what but that's been in the trades, as a rumor.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know which way he's going, one way or the other. And that was one of the questions that I lobbed at him when he sat down for the book, and he wouldn't answer it. Maybe because he didn't know at the time, still too, because he was going over his footage and seeing how much he had. I personally would love to see it as a multi-part show in a way that, like Watchmen, that recently came to HBO.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, was a contained, multi-episode story that Zack's feature could almost be divided up into if he has enough way to sort of do it. To me, HBO Max is the ideal fit for this movie to go to, because as much as I would love to see it on a theater screen, and perhaps, someday we'll get an opportunity to do that. Like as long as the film exists, or even a TV series exists, I think that fans will be fighting for an opportunity to play it theatrically. But the theatrical window is so screwed up right now. There's so many movies that are waiting for their chance to come out that the mid-level and independent films are getting squeezed. There's just no space for them. There's no time for them. So there would absolutely be no space or time for the director's cut of Justice League. So it always had to go to either a streaming service or a Blu-ray set, or a DVD box set that fans could take so that they'd have physical media copy of it. But I never ever saw an avenue where it made its way to theaters.
Okay, yeah, no, that was my concern, because I mean, when there's rumblings of Snyder Cut, I couldn't see a potential way for it to go to cinemas, but HBO Max, I agree, is a perfect platform to release it on.
For this reason alone, too, these new subscribing services are all in competition with each other, and they need something original that helps them stand out to lure subscribers. Like Netflix has Stranger Things and other television shows that they bring, or original films. If you're an Adam Sandler fan, you go to Netflix. Disney Plus, big with the Mandalorian. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, Hamilton.
So yeah, exactly. So HBO Max needed something. They needed a huge get that attracted people. And it's funny, like, I do hear from a lot of people around the world that HBO Max is not available in their area yet, and they hope that it's resolved before this arrives in 2021. I have a feeling that it will be, but yeah, that's a concern right now.
Well, it's funny that you talk about the availability of HBO Max, because we don't have it here in Australia. We actually, I know that our the HBO is tied into a licensing deal with Foxtel, which is a big cable company here. Mm-hmm. And HBO movies and TV shows exclusively air on Foxtel. So I'm wondering when HBO, if Justice League is going to come to Foxtel, which is actually really interesting. But I mean, like, look, that's a conversation for another time. Talk to me about the book, like the writing of the writing process. I mean, you're a family man. How do you have the time to sit down and, like, do you map out a structure before sitting down and writing it? Like, I know you have to do a ton of research and confirming that research. So how do you find the time to do all this on top of podcasting, on top of your actual day job?
Yeah, no. When I look back on it now, I look at certain chapters and I don't remember writing them. I don't remember the process. I treated it this way. I had an outline, which is part of a proposal that you have to use to even sell the book. You have to let people know that this is the content that's going to go into the book. If you're writing a fiction book, you actually have to have the entire thing written to shop around to publishers. But with a nonfiction book, you can sell them on an idea. And if they believe that there's enough there, then they sort of give you the permission to go out and get the interviews for it. And so, but I didn't even realize this one aspect of this that I didn't know, which is the proposal that I was sending around to different publishers to try to sell the concept. I've been told now is bad because it couldn't be that bad because it worked, but it didn't have a sample chapter which would show a potential publisher that you have access to people, like that you can get original interviews.
Right.
And you have to almost sell yourself. So what I guess I sold myself on, what they bought into, was the idea of CinemaBlend being a pretty big outlet. And ReelBlend, being a podcast that has access to these different celebrities. They just figured I would be able to get the story to put it all together and tell it. But in a perfect society, I would have had a sample chapter that showed them, this is the tone of my writing. This is how I plan on telling the story. These are quotes from people that I spoke to, kind of thing. So I had the structure laid out where these were all the elements that I knew I wanted to touch on. I wanted to touch on Zack's introduction to the DCEU. I wanted to talk about Marvel and their rivalry and building the MCU a little bit. I wanted to talk about how things went wrong by BVS not necessarily performing as well as Warner Brothers thought it was going to do. I was going to get into why Zack left. I was going to get into Whedon's takeover kind of thing. Takeovers are wrong. That's too strong of a word. Him being hired as a replacement, essentially. I was going to get into the mustache, Henry Cavill's mustache, deserves its own chapter, all of these things. And so when you talk about the time, and this is why I say, like, I just wrote whenever I could. And I'm so thankful to my wife and kids that they just understand. They're understanding. My kids are older. They're not nearly as they're self-sufficient now. They do their own thing. They're into their own stuff. So the fact that dad's, diving into his book again isn't as distracting as it would be if they were little. And my wife was just supportive. Like, she was just so great in terms of and really helped me shape the direction of the book too, to make me get away from the industry side of it and make it more human about the people in the movement and get their stories. That was absolutely her recommendation. And they were super just like, this is so cool that you want to embark on writing a book. And I'll tell you this much too. Once you scratch that itch, it just keeps gnawing at you. And so I'm not going to stop. I have a couple other book ideas that I'm going to pursue.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so awesome to hear.
I need to take a break. I need to take a break for a little bit. Because it overwhelms your time. Like, honestly, when you're writing a book, you think about very little else. You constantly want to keep going back and tweaking it and changing it and hopefully improving it. So it's a daunting process.
Absolutely. I mean, and would you say like that's the biggest challenge in writing your book? Like, is it the time aspect of it, or would you say a bigger challenge is to actually get credible sort of like interviews to actually back up your research?
Oh, I love doing that. Like, that's part of the reason why ReelBlend gets so many good interviews, is because the three of us love pursuing people. There's a whole aspect of film journalists that are very happy to have invitations to press events sent to them. And then there's the three of us that actively go out and get people because we want to talk to them. And so when you're writing a book, you have a list of people that you want to speak to, and it's up to you to get them. And I really do love that aspect of it. I love the hunt, and I like being told by people, no, they're not going to do it. And then I just need to try to convince them. Getting their quotes, like once you get their quotes, once you get their side of the story, it's really fun to shape it into a narrative. And I treated it chapter by chapter. So I'd be like, okay, now I'm going to write about the weekend the Justice League came out. Who do I need to speak to? Who am I going to get from the movement to tell me different things? Who am I going to get from the studio side? Who am I going to get from the industry side? And I would drop all of it into a document. And then this is what I've been doing for more than 20 years, is taking that and shaping it into what I think to be an interesting story. So that part's fun. I love all of that. It's just time consuming.
Oh, absolutely. And just out of my own curiosity, like, how, I mean, the Star Wars fan base has so many, huge notable fans. Like, is there a equivalent to the 501st Legion in the Snyder movement? Like, are there like these, do you know what I mean? Like, is there an actual sort of like notable person that you actually went to and you're like, okay, let's sit down and talk about this?
Oh, that's funny. There are factions in the Snyder Cut fan base. There's the Snyder's Amazonians, which is a group of female Snyder fans who run their own podcast. Wow. There was a group called the Film Exiles that do Snyder Cut podcasts as well too. The Stephen Colbert, who works for Screen Rant, another film entertainment website, he does a podcast called Batman v Superman Minute by Minute, where he literally just analyzes each minute of frame from the footage.
Wow.
So there's absolutely people out there. And then there's a group of fans that have worked for a long time behind the scenes that don't want to be publicized, that really just do it to benefit Zack, to get the film released. And then there's a huge charitable component to the work done by the Snyder Cut family on behalf of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And that's tied to the fact that Zack and Debbie lost their daughter Autumn at age 20. She died by suicide. And that was the reason given for why Zack left Justice League in the first place, is that he lost his daughter. He thought he could immerse himself in the work, and it ended up being too much, and he wanted to be with his family. And that's he walked away from the project at the time because of that, and they hired Whedon to sort of finish it. So the Snyder Cut movement, the whole time that they were, rattling everyone's chains and banging on pots and pans to raise awareness for the Snyder Cut, they always made sure that anything that they did from a marketing perspective always raised additional funds for the AFSP. And to date now, so far, and this blows my mind, they have raised over $200,000 just from their individual campaigns alone to benefit AFSP. And I know Zack is blown away by that. He has said to me repeatedly that their work, the fan base's work, has saved lives because it's put money into the resources that the AFSP uses, whether it's hotlines or just proposals to get counselors in front of people. Like, their work has made a difference. It's not just been about a movie. It's always been about helping other people and being there when people need help.
I mean, that's just so fantastic to hear. I mean, that we live in this world where fandom is, can be pretty toxic, with the internet. But I mean, that just right there is a pure example of fandom, of just how great it can be. It's beautiful. Sean, we are huge fans of Christopher Nolan here on the podcast. And, Christopher Nolan is a director who, in a producer capacity, has been linked to Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman. I don't think Justice League.
No, he bailed. What? He bailed by that.
Yeah.
Wisely.
Yeah,
Wisely.
Right, exactly. How much influence do you think that Nolan had in those early kind of like Man of Steel days, Batman vs. Superman days, and how much of that influence do you think fed its way into Joss Whedon's Justice League and then eventually now HBO's and Zack Snyder's Justice League?
Oh, it was huge. I mean, Nolan handpicked Snyder for Man of Steel. He knew that Zack, or he believed in Zack and wanted Zack to be the person to shepherd Kal-El, into the universe, and to also help him build what would go on to become the DC Extended Universe. And for a while, I think Nolan batted around the idea of potentially directing that Superman movie, and he had ideas with David Goyer when Goyer was screenwriting it. And they took a bunch of pitches from other directors at that time. I'm trying to think of who was I know Matthew Vaughn was one of the directors considered at that time. God, I'm blanking on who else was considered. Jonathan Liebsman, I believe, was one of the ones who was considered. And then Zack. And then they also took pitches from a bunch of comic writers, a bunch of screenwriters. And Jeff Johns was one of the guys at that time who pitched a film as well, too. But there was always Superman pitches that were floating around. J.J. Abrams allegedly had a really strong one. I know Kevin Smith.
Flyby, right?
Yeah, Flyby was the Abrams one. So there was always these ideas for Superman films. But it was Nolan who tapped Zack and said, you're going to be the guy. And at the time, too, Warner Brothers was super high on the darker, serious, more mature approach that Nolan took to Batman in his trilogy. And they wanted to replicate that with Superman.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'll never forget that moment where I sit down in the theater to see, The Dark Knight Rises in 2012, and then seeing the teaser for Man of Steel the year after, and just, hearing that Zimmer score, just before he takes off, and I'm just like, oh my God.
Yeah, exactly.
It kicked my ass, man. It kicked my ass.
Well, and it was it was a direct reaction to Bryan Singer's work in Superman Returns also, which was such a love letter to Donner and didn't work. It didn't work, and so the studio was like, well, we can't go in that direction. So why don't we invest further into what Nolan has set up here and get someone who can
what works?
Yeah, and craft something that fits that mold. Now, what backfired is that at the same time, Marvel was cranking out lighter, more crowd-friendly hits that were making a ton of money. So Warner Brothers was like, we kind of want to do what Christopher Nolan did, but we also really want to make a lot of money, like they're doing over there. And you couldn't have both at that time.
Right. No, absolutely. And casting someone like Michael Shannon in the Zod role, huge.
Tremendous.
Sean, this is me pushing a little bit now, and feel free to back away from this.
Sure.
But you tweeted that you recently ripped out an entire chapter of the book.
Yes, I did.
I'm not going to push and say, why, what was it? But what's the thinking there? Like, what is this like? Kind of like I don't want to talk about this professionally. I don't want this out there in the world. Like, what's the try and dance around the subject.
Yeah.
You don't want to reveal it.
No. That's a terrific question, and I wish it was something more revealing than that. It's just simply the book for a time had to work if Zack Snyder's Justice League was not coming.
Okay.
When I finished it, it really existed as a property of it's open-ended, and a lot of it was written just of if it comes, if it happens kind of thing. And then May 20th happened, and it flipped everything on its ear. Now, the good news is because the book was largely dedicated to the history of this, to what happened, getting us to that point, it didn't require a complete rewrite, but it had a different ending. And it in addition, it needed a different beginning, because I wrestled for a long time with, okay, where do I start this story? Where do I begin? And I won't reveal here where I was starting, but I'll say that I have a different beginning in addition to a different ending, right? And what I did was, and this is going to make it sound more dramatic than it even was, I still tried to hold on to the intro that I had because I liked it. I liked it. I just moved it back a little bit more. And the more I looked it over, this is pretty funny too, because over the course of doing this, I sold this book on my own, just by pitching it to different publishers. And again, that goes back to me, the way I told you, I just love doing that. And I was really happy that I got a publisher, and I was very proud of myself. But over the course of this, I picked up a literary agent, and they're going to help me going down the road. So they read the manuscript. I gave them the manuscript when it was finished, and they were going to give me notes. And in between sending it to them and just rereading it, because I'll tell you, that's what you do. You just sit there and reread it. I was like, you know what? This whole section doesn't work. It doesn't fit. It's got good stories in it. It's got good quotes in it. I said, it just doesn't, it's not relevant anymore, and I had to let it go. I had to take it out. And what happened was I read from the chapter before it directly to the chapter after it. And I was like, yeah, that just flows better. So it was gone. And I took stuff from it and moved it into other places. So it's not completely sacrificed, but that's just what happened. It was Zack announcing the movie changed in the best way possible, a big element of the book. And again, I would never trade that for the world. This is what you want. You want the ending. So I wish it was more dramatic than that.
No, absolutely. So, I mean, like, it was purely, from it was the best news possible, right? That made you change your book, pretty much.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, like, directors have told us this before on the podcast, and when not that the book compares to like a film in any way, but directors have said you never finish with a book. You never finish with a movie. They just rip it out of your hands because it finally has to go to theaters. Like, I would tinker with this book forever if I didn't have a deadline. If it didn't eventually have to get to a publisher so it could get out. For this reason alone, too, the story never ends. This story of the Snyder Cut and the Snyder Cut movement, it never ends. Like, we have Justice Con, the fan event that's being put on by the Nerd Queens and Meg, Wonder Meg. There's going to be stuff coming out of that because Zach's going to host a panel, and Ray Fisher's going to be on a panel, and Ray Porter's doing a panel. There's DC Fandom, coming in August. So, and then there's the movie itself when it comes. Like, I've been asked by people who are like, "Are you going to wait to put your book out till I see the movie?" And I'm like, I can't. You can't keep telling the story. At some point, it has to stop, and I got to pass the baton to whoever's going to keep telling the rest of it, because the book has to sort of conclude.
No, absolutely. And right now, Midnight Double Feature, we're not a tabloid podcast. We're not interested in like TMZ, like headlines and stuff. We don't really get into them.
Mm-hmm.
But you have those stories coming out about, unfortunately, Joss Whedon and all these, what Ray Fisher said. So you have things like that are still kind of like adding to the conversation still, which I'd imagine that people are still, they might still be wanting you to address, right? Like probably in the book or something like that.
It's addressed. I'll say that. I can say that it's addressed. And a lot of it's just what I was able to report. Like I wasn't going to put anything in that's salacious if I couldn't back it up. So that's a lot of what I was able to report.
There you go. So just right at the end here, let's leave with some heavier questions. Well, not really heavy, but more of a let's think about this. HBO Max, $30 to $40 million, however much Warner Brothers is giving to Zack Snyder. Do you think that's really a Snyder Cut? I mean, like, do you think that after all this, Zack Snyder's vision might have changed? You know, like, especially given the rumors that this might be a series as well.
I mean, yes, I do. That is one of the biggest burning questions is, and I will tell you, I asked him this and he wouldn't answer. Is this a one-off? You get to finish this and we should all be happy. Or is this, hey, you're back in, you know? Where are we going from here? Is Zack Snyder's Justice League going to end on a exclamation point, or is it a cliffhanger, right? And we won't know until we see it. So here's the thing. There have been very successful limited series TV shows, you know, that ran for a season or two and bailed. And we always talk about, like, that was a great story, you know? And then there's some that go on too long and overstay their welcome, right? I think Zack has a lot of story that he could tell. And if I'm HBO Max, I'm probably pretty interested in keeping him along, you know?
Yeah.
But I've also kind of said that I know Zack has other stories outside of DC that he wants to tell. So how much time does he want to commit to this? And do you want him to pass the torch to someone else who would keep telling it on DC? I don't on HBO Max. I don't know. The industry is changing constantly. You know, I would never have dreamed that you would see. God, go back 2 years. If you told me 2 years ago that Martin Scorsese would have a Netflix movie, you know, that had Pacino, De Niro, and Pesci together, I'd have laughed until I fell on the floor.
A $200 million Netflix movie. But
anything is possible now. You know, you can't say no to anything because we're starting to see all of it happen. So if Zack were to commit to multiple seasons of Justice League and, you know, get Ben and Henry and Gal to commit, yes, it's possible. Is it probable? No, but it's possible. It's 100% possible.
I mean, I'd personally love to see it. Like, you know, given now that this is all materialized and it's real, I mean, you know, why not, right? I mean, like, just do it. I mean, the more Batman, the better, in my book.
Of course.
Doesn't matter who's playing Batman. I'm always down for more Batman. Okay, so this is kind of, we're opening the scope a little bit. You know, given the Snyder Cut is being released primarily, pretty much like 99%, the reason is because of the movement. And then we've got, you know, other sort of like movies like Sonic the Hedgehog that have been altered due to fan activism. You know, and unconfirmed, you know, Rise of Skywalker was somewhat of a reaction to The Last Jedi. What do you think is the way that directors and writers and producers will, like, how do you think they're going to move on in the future? Like, do you think Hollywood's going to learn something from this?
No. Hollywood never learns anything from that at all. And also, I honestly do think that what happened with this situation is really rare. You know, that a director who happened to be beloved by a really passionate, dedicated, vocal fan base got shortchanged on a really important movie. And I've been saying this on a couple of other shows. Whatever movie was in production when Warner Brothers decided to shift away from the Snyderverse to a more independent, lighter, Marvel-friendly direction, that movie was going to get altered, you know, drastically. It could have been the Flash movie that Ezra Miller was supposed to do. It could have been Shazam if Shazam was next up in the production cycle. That movie was going to suffer because of the change in direction. It just happened to be that it was Justice League. But people behind the scenes at Warner Brothers at that point said, we're going to move away from the dark and serious, you know, the Christopher Nolan influenced, the Zack Snyder influenced, and we're going to go towards more of Shazam and Wonder Woman and even James Wan doing Aquaman. We're going in that direction instead to try it out. So Justice League failed. Now, there's so many factors that could have gone into this journey that wouldn't lead us to this point, which is, number one, what if Joss Whedon's cut of Justice League was good? What if it worked? You know, what if he managed to put something together that was entertaining to fans? The fan base wouldn't be clamoring quite as loudly for Zack's vision. I think some people who really love Zack would have, but the majority of the people who just went to go see a Justice League movie and really liked it, they would have been content and they would have moved on. Or if Zack at any point in this journey had said, "Hey guys, I'm done with this. I don't want anything to do with that movie," They ripped it out of my hands. I'm going to go make this Army of the Dead movie. I'm going to go make an Ayn Rand adaptation. I got a million other things I want to do. Don't associate me with DC anymore. That would have derailed the movement. And none of those things happened. Zack kept fighting for it alongside the movement. The theatrical cut of Justice League is a disaster, and fans got really upset. All these things laid into this getting us to this point. But if it were more common, then you'd see David Ayer's Suicide Squad, or you'd see a JJ cut, or there's a bunch of other examples. But I think for the most part, the movies that come to theaters are the director's version, whether it's slightly compromised because they're working with producers or some such. There's fights on every movie. It's just how big is the fight kind of thing.
No, absolutely. And you see it more with, big studio films, right? I mean, like, it's a studio that's financing it more often than not. So, it makes sense that there'd be more studio interference with sort of the bigger stuff. I mean, you mentioned that, a movie like Justice League is being kind of like, let's bring it down to a certain term, Marvelized. We kind of started to see that with Suicide Squad, right? I mean, that they had a darker tone. We had that Comic-Con trailer that was like super dark, but really, really awesome. And then they kind of like changed up their vision when Guardians of the Galaxy started, picking up and taking off in their tone. So,
100%. But here's why I know that they won't change or fix themselves or learn from any of their lessons. They always look for trends when trends don't exist. Todd Phillips was given the opportunity to make a low-budget Joker movie, and it made over $1 billion because he had a story he wanted to tell. And too often, the industry tries to force people into situations. We need this, so find me someone who can deliver it, instead of being approached by a filmmaker who says, I have a really good idea for fill in the blank, and I think we can do it. And the studio says, yeah, go try that. Go do that. Instead, they're like, we need a Joker movie. Who's the next up and comer who can give us a Joker movie? And that person doesn't really believe in Joker. They want a job, So, but then every once in a while, the material really sings, and you get James Gunn doing the first Guardians film, or the Russos tackling Captain America or some such. And that just, because even Nolan, I think Nolan was intrigued by Batman, but I don't think Nolan wanted to do a trilogy,
Right.
And then they just kept bringing him on board. And that, I think with Nolan, it became a situation of one for you, one for me. Okay, give us another Batman movie, and then you can go make Inception. And thank God for that. Give us another Batman movie, and then we'll bankroll the Prestige. And so we got masterpieces in between,
It works, right?
Yeah.
It's a win-win situation, absolutely.
But it doesn't always work that way. That's the thing.
No, unfortunately not. Sean, are there any other movies that you wish could have turned out differently, like had it been for a movement or fan activism, like similar to, Release the Snyder Cut?
Oh, that's a great question. That is a great question. I mean, selfishly, I think that Andrew Garfield needed more swings at Spider-Man, no pun intended. I really liked him, and I liked his interpretation, and it felt like even though he had 2 films, they were just getting started. But I understand somewhat why Sony had to go in the different direction. And of course, then they got a chance to share that character with Marvel. Listen, we could do weeks of podcasts on the 3 Star Wars movies that just came out of.
And feel free to come back on, by the way.
I mean, it boggles my mind that Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker are 3 films in a trilogy that have no relation to each other in any way, shape, or form. It
does not feel like they're having a conversation with each other at all.
No, not in terms of tone, character development, story, and nothing. They're actually 3 movies that, in my opinion, actively dislike each other, and don't tell any sort of continuous story. So that alone is who the heck was piloting that ship? And how did we get to that point? So
absolutely, that's a good choice. Actually, that might be one of the most popular choices or answers to that particular question.
Well, and I'm a huge Fantastic Four fan, and not that I necessarily think Josh Trank was on the right path, but he got screwed over too. That's another example of someone who just got really jobbed by the system.
Oh, absolutely, and it's you guys interviewed Josh Trank for Capone, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we did get him.
Yeah. That was a great episode too, because you guys touch on Fantastic Four in that episode too. So, Sean, what's next for you, right? I mean, like the book doesn't have a release date yet. I think what you said is you're waiting for a hard and fast release date for the HBO Max Zack Snyder Cut. So, are you going on are you going to do some press? Like, are you going on actual promoting tours?
I
What are
hope
you
so.
doing?
Yeah, no, I hope so. And part of the reason why we would like to drop when the movie hits HBO Max is just for the synergy of that. And yeah, I mean, the hardest part right now is that I'm getting a lot of questions about pre-order. And it's just we're not at that point in the process yet. And maybe I should have kept my mouth shut. Maybe I shouldn't be talking about it as much as I have been. But A, I'm super excited because I like the book. And B, I'm guilty of a lot of self-promotion. And I've been excited, I use social media in a big way to get the people in the movement to speak to me and to sort of win them over and convince them that I was on their side. So I just keep using it, and I'm still engaged in the community, and it's become a really big thing. And that's why I think any kind of book that I do after this is not going to be this felt like covering a breaking news story for 3 years. Because there was always something new happening with it, and there was always someone else to talk to, and there was always how am I going to shape this into the narrative? I think I'm going to shift away next for a project and do something that's really research heavy and labor intensive from that perspective, because the idea of keeping up with this ever moving story was really rewarding, but really exhausting. Because the story was always changing. It was always shifting in a different direction. So when the movie comes out, yeah, I'll talk to anybody. I mean, I will do as much press as physically possible, because I think that the book can work really well, whether you think you know every aspect of this story, or whether you are a complete newcomer who really just wants to know, why the heck is the Snyder Cut such an important thing? I wanted the book to sort of be able to answer both of those audiences.
Absolutely, and I will listen to every interview you give.
Oh, dude, you're so nice. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you.
I can't wait to pick up a copy of the book. Honestly, you mentioned that it's about to be available for pre-order on Amazon, right?
Well, I hope so. So what I was told by the publishers. See, the thing is, I'm learning about the publishing cycle. And I have to go through edits with them now. Once I turn the manuscript in, which will be next week, I'll go through serious edits with them. And then, but the production cycle or the publishing cycle, they're a year out. I think at some point this year, they will announce what their slate is for next year. And so then I'll have an idea of where I fall. But I'm going to argue with them about it coming out in the first quarter of next year, because that's what I'm hearing. Zack's movie might come to HBO Max, and I want to make sure that I'm ahead of it. But even if it doesn't, even if it comes out in the summer or gets delayed because of COVID for whatever reason, I still would like the book to come out early, to have people have the chance to read through it and familiarize themselves with everything that happens, so that they appreciate the film a little bit more.
Absolutely. And I can't wait. Honestly, the cover looks amazing. I love your cover art, dude. It looks absolutely fantastic.
Dude, you can't wait. It kills me every time someone asks for pre-order, because I just want to give them the book. I would just love to hand it to them. It's really, at that point, the hardest part right now really is just waiting. It's going to be tough to wait. But
absolutely. But I mean, look, the time's going to fly by, and by the time you blink, you'll be releasing the book, and everyone's, you'll be getting little reviews all over Twitter, and everyone's going to be letting you know what they think of the book. So
that's terrifying. Social media reviews.
I'm sure you did a great job.
Thank you.
Sean, final two questions here.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the answer to this one, right? This is a endless argument that we've been having here on the podcast, but I know your answer. I just want you to say it.
Oh,
Jaws or Jurassic Park?
Oh, Jaws. Not even close.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Jaws.
I just absolutely. And I know your cinemas aren't open yet, but ours is just opened back up.
Yeah.
I just went to a double feature of Jaws and Jurassic Park, and I was sitting with a friend who is one of the co-hosts here of the double feature, and he's a big Jurassic Park fan, and so am I. I mean, who isn't? But I'm just like, dude, Jaws is a perfect film. It's just a perfect film.
And by no means am I trying to slight Jurassic Park, because Jurassic Park is
no way
fantastic. Yeah. But however, Spielberg just got a little softer, over the years, and by the time he got to Jurassic Park, it was a little bit softer. Jaws is lean and mean, and just like you said, it's a perfect film. There's not a wasted scene in it at all. And it's tremendous. It's a masterpiece.
Absolutely. And Sean, finally, what is your perfect double feature? So you had to sit there for 2 movies, and these 2 movies are just complement each other so well. You had like 4 hours of spare time, which I doubt you have.
Has to be on the big screen. It's like a big screen double feature.
Has to be on the big screen. Absolutely. We're all about cinematic experience.
All right, hold on then. Let me think about that. You hit me with that. I want to pick something that benefits from a big screen. I'm gonna do. Oh, that's a really good question. Hold on, let me think, because I want to give this. I want to give this the right answer.
Well, I'll give you mine too.
Give me yours while I'm thinking about it.
No, all good. So mine, Back to the Future, the first one, and Ghostbusters.
An incredible movie-going experience. The first Back to the Future.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna one of them has to be La La Land, because I would want a musical that really takes advantage of the sound system. And I'm gonna say La La Land transitioning into Cuarón's Gravity. Because it's a film that I've tried to watch again on Blu-ray, and it loses something off the big screen.
It does.
And it is when I saw it on an IMAX screen, it was as immersive as movies get, and it is just tremendous. And then it's still good on the Blu-ray, but it loses a little something. So I'd go Gravity first to put your heart in your throat, and then you can just unwind with one of the greatest musical love stories of our generation, which is Chazelle's La La Land.
God damn, that's a good pull. Honestly, like both of those films are fantastic. I saw Gravity 3 times at the movies, man, and like both of them. Sorry, the first 2 times were in IMAX. And it's like you said, man. It's hot in your mouth.
Yeah, well,
it's just tension.
Cuarón's a genius, obviously.
He absolutely is. Sean, thank you so much for joining us here at Minute Double Feature. Honestly, this was such a blast. Just such a kind of like a dream kind of interview moment, considering that you guys are invading my ears every week. So this has been like an absolutely kind of like a cloud 9 kind of experience for me. So thank you.
That is ridiculous, but thank you very much. And listen, I will be happy to come back on anytime and talk movies with you, because this was a lot of fun and great questions, man. Honestly, really good questions.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Honestly, that's so good to hear. Why don't you tell us where you can find yourself? Tell us where you can find the Release the Snyder Cut book, because I know that you've got your own sort of Twitter feed for that as well, and where we can find ReelBlend and CinemaBlend.
Yeah, sure. So CinemaBlend is the website where we post all of our entertainment content at cinemablend.com. ReelBlend you can get at any place where you download podcasts. We're also on Spotify, we're on Apple, iTunes, and all those different places. The ReelBlend, the Release the Snyder Cut book does have a Twitter feed. It's at RTSC, Release the Snyder Cut, RTSC book. And you can find me at Sean_O'Connell on Twitter, and I'm sharing content across both of those feeds on a regular basis.
That's badass, man. Honestly, thank you so much again, Sean, for joining us here in Minute Double Feature. I hope to hopefully have you on again once the book's released and I've had a chance to read through it, which I cannot wait to do.
It was my honor, dude. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.